In this video, we're going to take a look at a recent article about banking and digital assets, as well as some other notable events that have transpired on why I believe that banks need Ripple and XRP now. Let's go.
And now, the XRP Minute with Chip on the chain.
Chip here with the XRP Minute. If it's your first time here, please like, subscribe, and click that little notification bell so you'll be notified of any new videos. Also, the best way you can support this channel is to share this video. Now, let's dive in head first into the shallow end for maximum impact. So I saw this article. This one was put out on Cointelegraph. Banks must establish infrastructure for digital assets before it's too late. Crypto adoption in traditional legacy systems is moving fast, but a lack of technological infrastructure limits compliance and safe storage. Now, the adoption of digital assets in traditional legacy systems is moving fast. In the middle of the year, the digital asset custody industry saw welcome developments when the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency officially announced that all nationally chartered banks in the U.S. could provide custody services for cryptocurrencies. Now, this was the first big event that happened way back in July. It seems like it was yesterday. The move, while positive for the ecosystem, is yet to be accompanied by rigorous assessment for its technological infrastructure. It's like asking questions such as, where are these newly acquired digital assets stored? It's a question that we probably have pondered and I've thought of myself. And one thing is clear, we've entered a new paradigm of finance that requires a different approach to securing assets. Digital assets offer great wealth potential, but asset custody providers have a responsibility to prevent their clients from becoming another figure of global crypto attacks, which reached a value of 1.4 billion in June earlier this year. According to the Financial Action Task Force yearly report, the industry's lack of infrastructure is limiting compliance and safe storage of assets. As traditional financial markets begin to embrace the space, they must develop robust, tailored technology solutions with the strength of a legacy system. So this article is pretty important for a number of reasons, because you've been hearing this for some time now, but Cointelegraph kind of pieces it together because banks really do have to create some sort of an infrastructure for digital assets. Now, they say before it's too late. Why? Because we've heard everything from a global reset. We've heard the U.S. dollar is not going to be the reserve currency anymore. There's a lot of things that are bubbling up that could all take place roughly around the same time. Now, banks custodying crypto is a positive step in the maturation of the digital assets. So traditional banks are the Pony Express. I mean, they must invest in telegraph wires. They're basically likening this to old days where if you were still the Pony Express and get on to deliver a letter and versus a telegraph line, you're going to have two different outcomes. So they're basically drawing the parallels here that the traditional banks and new fintech digital asset providers can be compared to the old story of the Western Union and the Pony Express. Traditional financial system and the new financial system will run in parallel, but with two different systems opening at one time. We'll still call payments payments, and investments will still be called investments, but the overarching infrastructure it runs on will be vastly different, like horse carriages and cars. So they're drawing a huge contrast here of how different it's going to be. In the new paradigm of finance, banks must understand these new requirements. First challenge for banks is understanding how does the new industry work. They need to understand the implementation of atomic swaps in the development of smart contracts. This technology doesn't play well in the traditional space. Well, why is that? Well, first of all, traditional banks were not set up with this forward thinking. So when you have smart contracts, the definition of a smart contract in the bank does not exist. So when you have legacy systems, there really is no room, and that's why you see the fintechs are coming out, hitting the ground running, and they're best in these traditional type of banks. We foresee a parallel system running in which players will use the infrastructure that works significantly different from traditional payment networks or settlement flows. There are many existing counterparties in the middle of those systems, and this status quo that won't change. So the only option for banks is to either adopt these technologies, right? They're not going to skirt them, they're not going to ignore them, and you either disrupt or you will be disrupted. That's how it goes. And if you don't know it, by the time you figure that out, you'll be the Blockbuster that used to rent videotapes when they had a chance to buy Netflix. and they said, not a big deal. By the time they figured it out, it was already over for them. Now, banks move too quickly to capitalize in the booming space, and they don't incorporate or correct the protective mechanisms. They may fail. The reputation of digital assets potential will be damaged, and the livelihoods of millions converting fiat may be lost. I don't see that happening. The biggest loss in assets in the world of digital finance is the theft of cryptographic access to keys. Custodians must learn how to better safeguard these from cyber attacks, which has been on the rise. Well, the best way to safeguard them is to put them in cold storage. I don't see custodies keeping hot wallets available for people to go and to hack into. So custody is changing the same way everything changes. To think that you're going to expect someone to have a ledger or a Trezor in their possession is ludicrous. It's not going to happen. It doesn't make any sense, and custody is a potential issue here. Now, many banks have yet to find ways to cost effectively service and protect themselves from such attacks. And they have to understand that digitized securities differ from traditional securities because they're essentially representations of value or contractual rights of real world assets. Digital assets are fraught with risk if not settled correctly, but qualified custodians will eliminate the risk of counterparties failing to fulfill a transaction. So I wholeheartedly, totally agree with what they're saying here. Banks entering crypto custody will need the tried and true crypto asset technology developed specifically for industry, and they will inevitably face and build versus buy decision, right? I've heard two schools of thought on this, that banks want to do everything themselves. They'd rather build it. But just coming from the tech world and understanding how things work, it's a lot easier to buy a tried and true tested system than try to go through all of the issues yourself when it comes to compliance. Why would you waste your time, and why would you have an endless pot of R&D money that you never know how it's going to work? So where is this all leading? So we're kind of outlaying this. The banks have to act. They've got to basically reform. They've got to either move into the future or be lost in the past. So if we look at the BIS, this was a speech. This was given on the 25th of September, just last week. This is Benoit Coil. He's the head of the Bank of International Settlements, better known as the BIS, BIS, and at the Galapagos Banca Annual Economic Conference. This is the one where he spoke. So you can watch the video. I actually watched the entire video, but I was happy to find the transcript here because I started going through this, and we're seeing something. If you guys are looking at price, if you guys aren't paying attention, you're looking at price. Yeah, but Chip, the price hasn't changed. Oh my God, what am I going to do? But it's like the most stable coin ever. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. That certainly does have its merit. However, if you're just looking at the price, you're missing a lot. If you haven't been paying attention, or you're new here and you don't have the benefit of the 3, 4 years to 8 years that Ripple's been building and putting this infrastructure in place, that's okay. We're going to take you through it. So Benoit basically starts this by greeting everybody, talking about 2020 will be remembered as a year, a catastrophic year. But one of the things that he addresses in here is the fact that what transpired over the previous 6 months has really changed the thinking of a lot of different people. It's shown that while banks continue to safeguard essential trust in its money, it's technology that enables our globally connected world and the provision of money to go around. Technology has been indispensable in helping to mitigate the economic and social impact of this crisis. Technology has enabled economic activity to continue at an arm's length and partially overcome socially distancing protocols. In many respects, the current crisis has therefore been a catalyst, forcing us all to take stock and rethink the rules of the game, right? So what they're basically saying here is they've been rethinking. Well, truth be told, they've been rethinking the rules of the game for a long time. This is the perfect storm because now you have a crumbling infrastructure. Central banks have now gone from 6 months ago of like CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, we're against them, to now all of a sudden embracing them, right? Which forced which hand? Was it this past 6 months and this crisis, or was it always on the table, or did it change hearts and minds? So these paradigm shifts raise important questions for panel discussions we'll cover. He goes on to say that the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, has been considering in depth for the last few years. He wants to emphasize the critical importance of international collaboration. So he's talking about the fact that this isn't just a centralized thing. This is something that affects everybody. So rethinking this catalyst for change. So he goes through and basically says that everything that unfolded, yet this whole crisis has highlighted both progress and shortcoming in payments. Payments, you say? Huh, that's interesting. Let's learn a little bit more. While access to payment services increased over time, it's far from universal, and he's spot on right there. So when we talk about Ripple and XRP, Ripple laying the groundwork with their software and their cloud software. You know, it can either be a hard install on servers, or now it's available via the cloud, or the bridge currency, which is XRP. This is what this was designed from day one, going back 8 years. So he says, while these low income and vulnerable groups face the greatest difficulty in paying or receiving funds. He goes on to talk about, you know, the unbanked and basically relying on old technology like checks. Checks take a long time, to clear, they're clunky, there could be issues with them. They want to improve these. They say one of the key challenges is how authorities and central banks can use their roles as catalysts and facilitators to spur this digital innovation. So there we go. We're hearing the same theme over and over again, digital innovation, and increased interoperability or integration in cross-border services. So let's pay attention to this. Let me highlight this here for you. One key challenge, therefore, is how authorities and central banks, right? And we're going to get into this a little bit further on. We're going to take you through this. Central banks can use their roles as catalysts and facilitators to spur this digital innovation, increase interoperability, integration in cross-border payment services. Now, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but there it is right there, laid it out. Interoperability. There's only really one player that can do it. Yeah, there are other people challenging it. There will be other challengers. But who is leading the pack? It's Ripple and it's XRP. When you're talking about interoperability, moving from any digital asset, being currency agnostic, whether it's cryptocurrency or digital assets, there is a huge advantage that Ripple comes having out of the box. Now we're talking about cross-border payments. Who is the expert at cross-border payments? So while they don't allude to Ripple or XRP or any of that in here, you got to pay attention to the signs of what's out there. It's really key, because if you miss this stuff and you're really focused on price, you know, a lot of us got in the space to make money. That's why we got into this space, to make money. If it's tomorrow or next week or 589 or on Thursday or when we find another secret document, okay, fair enough. I don't subscribe to that. I believe that you got to start looking at infrastructure. Everything's built around infrastructure, and when the groundwork is laid, you look throughout history, it's happened time and time again. Moving right along here. So this comes from the digital. This is a digital finance package. This is from the European Commission. The digital finance strategy right here. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little search here. There we go. Boom, found it. So they talk about issuers of significant asset-based crypto assets would be subject to more stringent capital requirements, liquidity, and interoperable requirements. Now, it's fun to use the word and throw that word around, interoperable, but let's face it, who's got the leg up here once again? Now, the EU announces its first ever plan to regulate cryptocurrencies. Coincidence? Is it a coincidence that we just had two bills that are up by bipartisan in the United States? We have the European Union to have a plan to go ahead and regulate cryptocurrencies. Is this by happenstance, chance? Is it just good timing while we're talking about CBDCs, cross-border payments, interoperability? Starting to get the theme here? Yeah, they're all connected. If you don't know they're connected, you got to start piecing it together. Now, here is the big long paper that you can go on and read ad nauseum, right? It talks about, this is all the proposal about how they're going to go ahead and regulate. Now, Ripple put out this tweet a couple hours ago, and the original article was written earlier in September, but it says modern technology must first be applied to the cross-border payments problem to complement ISO regulation standards. Well, here's why. So this is an article about why real-time cross-border payments are poised to break through. Now, we just went through, we looked at the BIS, right? We looked at the European Union, we looked at regulations that are coming down the pike, and this was written by Marcus Treacher. This was back in September 2nd. Now, let's go through here. I'm going to pick out some key points here. Again, they talk about the crisis that taught us one thing about payments. What is that? That sounds very familiar, right? Speed, reliability, on-demand access to money, more important in a world powered by digital interaction. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, we're hearing the same thing, the same languaging used by a number of different people over and over again. Now, the change will come when the potential to optimize better ways of doing day-to-day life and payments included. So there we are on the payment again. Solving the glaring deficiencies of the current cross-border payment ecosystem is a challenge that must be overcome. There you go. Sounds familiar, right? We just talked about that. Luckily, the tide seems to be shifting. Powerful new technologies built on blockchain and powered with digital assets are catalyzing a sea change of how money is moved around the world. There's that word again, catalyze, right? The snapshot of the cross-border payment landscape today. So this goes back to Brad Garlinghouse's age-old sort of analogy where he says if you ever want to send money abroad, well, you're aware of how frustrating it can be. To say that the current infrastructure for cross-border payments is broken would be an understatement. He's talked about the best way to deliver it is get on a plane with some fiat, 7, 8, 10 hours later, you just go ahead and drop it off. That's the fastest way traditionally to send money. Sending global cross-border payments should be easy, seamless, right? The same sort of language we've heard over and over again, and about solving the issues that are important for people and businesses worldwide, especially important for payment flows. Low to middle income, countries like Mexico. Okay, there's your remittances that we're talking about, and there's just a lot of stuff out there that's been talking about remittances. We're going to go ahead, and now we're going to have in an article in a little bit here where the Federal Reserve is talking about remittances. So solving the cross-border problem with RippleNet and ISO. So the International Standards Organization, known as ISO, established the ISO 20022 as a universal standard to bring these legacy payment infrastructures into alignment, but without a fundamental overhaul of these payment infrastructures, the ISO standardization can only go so far. Well, what do we know about ISO 222? Well, we know that 2 times already SWIFT has delayed the deadline. They're not even to next year, and they're already saying they're going to miss next year's deadline. Now they're looking at 2023, 2024, right? So they're not even in the game. They have no close. By the time that rolls around, they're so far off the game. They don't even matter. Now, Ripple's vision was to deliver the technology transformation by establishing a new global network known as RippleNet. They go on to talk about the DLT, distributed ledger tech, and this is tightly, basically interfaced with the ISO standards. Ripple has been a leading proponent of ISO 20022 and its mission to enable these payments. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole article, but what I want you to glean, kind of walk away from this is we're hearing this languaging. Now, where did you hear this in other places? Ripple started the conversation. Now, here we go right here. This is the FedNow payments organization. Remittance payments, 3 cross-border corridors to get to know. Well, let's look at those. So they go on to talk about these remittances, which basically, you might be an expat sending money home, and that's really what they look at, a remittance. They go on to explain that here. Mexico. Well, what do we know about Mexico? Well, we know that MoneyGram has been sending a significant amount of remittances back there, right? We know that they're working with a exchange that works and specializes in not only Mexico, but also Central and South America, right? So they basically point out some of the big ones. You got China, and then you have India, right? So we've heard and seen this before, but this is the Federal Reserve talking about this. Now, you guys remember seeing this picture. This is the picture that was famous for Brad Garlinghouse and Christine Lagarde. This particular image surface. This was from a Swiss National Banking Conference that you may have remembered. This happened in 2019 if you guys saw the video, but if not, it's not a big deal. But I want to take you through here and I want to show you. So now we see Brad Garlinghouse sitting there, right? There he is right there. This gentleman right here in the blue suit that said, "Holy cow, I wore a blue suit today." No one sent me the memo that said that it was supposed to wear darker suits. See, everyone's wearing dark colors here, right? That's what he's thinking about, looking out into the sea of people. Who is this person right here? Well, this is the director of monetary markets at the IMF, right there. Boom. On a panel discussion with who? Brad Garlinghouse. Who is this gentleman right here who's looking out there thinking, wow, I wore a brown suit. Why didn't somebody tell me that it was dark suits? And why didn't I at least wear my blue or my black suit, right? Who is this gentleman right here? Well, this is none other than the chairman of the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority. Interesting. Sitting on a panel with Mr. Brad Garlinghouse, CEO of Ripple. Then we look at this gentleman over here who's looking at both of these guys saying, blue and brown suit? What the heck? He's none other than the chief exec, Hong Kong Monetary Authority. And who do we have here but Brad Garlinghouse? And he is the CEO of Ripple. Sitting here, and who do we have here? Well, this is Christine Lagarde. This is back when she was running the IMF before she moved on. And, you know, she transitioned to the European Central Bank, right? They love what she was doing at the IMF, and then they brought her on board. Now, let's take a look over here. There's the room. Here you see the players up here. You see a couple of the people. You have Christine Lagarde sitting here. You got Thomas Jordan. He's the chairman of the Swiss National Bank. You have Aurea Sakashwana Nubila. Wow, did I butcher the heck out of that? You have the head of the Central Bank of Russia sitting right over here. Okay, here's the room. These are filled with people of all over the place. You know, these are heads. These aren't just these aren't the button pushers. These are the people that make everything happen at the banks. Now, let's take a look at this again. Look at his look. He's like, wow, wow, wow. And Brad's just calmly looking at his notes. What's he thinking there? He's like, I got this, man. This is not a problem. He's just checking his notes and waiting for his time to speak. Lastly, let's conclude right here. This picture right here, this one right here, you see right here in the center, this is Christine Lagarde. This photo was taken way back in 2019 in Singapore. This is the high-level advisory group of the IMF. Now you see a lot of players there. Do I know who all of them are? I just do not know, but they're people from all over the world. But I tell you what, I know who this figure is right here, and who is there from a blockchain-based company that's worth $10 billion out of San Francisco, California, in the United States. We have none other than Brad Garlinghouse, CEO of Ripple, hanging out, rubbing shoulders with the elites, right? Do you see anybody else? Do you see anybody else that stands out in there? No, because they're all banking professionals, they're all policymakers, and who do we have sitting there? That's right, Brad Garlinghouse. So what I hope you take away from this is that there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Keep your eye out for what's happening, the language that you see used over and over, because it's a very similar type of a language. You see this over and over again, right? Cross-border payments, unbanked, interoperability. Well, who's bringing that? It's none other than Ripple. The foundation's been laid for a long time. Now, if you don't think that the foundational stuff has been happening, you've been missing stuff, right? If you're not paying attention, you're gonna miss stuff. And that's why I wanted to point some of this out, bridge some of it together. There's far more stuff out there that we could sort of go on about. It's just an enormous amount of stuff that we could go on about. But I want you to leave this, stop thinking about the price, look at the infrastructure that's being laid. Do you think people can catch up? They can. You think people are going to challenge? They will. Now, when you're the leader of the pack, you're going to take a significant amount of the market share, and you see Brad Garlinghouse rubbing, and you see Ripple all over the place. You keep your eyes open, your ears available, you're going to see a lot of this. This is Chip. That's my take. I want to know yours down below. Let me know, and I'll see you on the next one. Chip out.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.